You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Wednesday, December 28th, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
Going well, buddy. Good to speak with you. Didn't think we'd be doing this again this year. So this is an added bonus podcast. I love it.
Yes, it is. We are also joined by fellow contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
Good evening, gentlemen.
What's up? It's good to be back on here. Just to piggyback on what my boy PVH said. Yeah. So it's really good to be back on here. There was we were given a gift.
We were given a gift, Second Life. Yeah, well, it's nice that we're actually talking about a playoff game and not some meaningless bowl game. I guess in our case, it might have been the Orange Bowl or something had Ohio State not qualified for the playoff. But thankfully they have, and we are here to preview that game. It's number 4 Ohio State versus top seed number 1 Georgia in the Peach Bowl. That's this Saturday night in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The line has held at Georgia minus 6.5 to the best of my knowledge, and the over-under is still 62. The game is an 8 p.m. kick on ESPN. This is Ohio State's first ever appearance in the Peach Bowl, by the way, guys. They have never played in that game, and they've actually never played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so 2 firsts for Ohio State. This is the last of the New Year's 6 games that Ohio State has not yet played in. And for what it's worth, ESPN's matchup predictor gives the Buckeyes a 42.4% chance of beating the Bulldogs. Now, I'm not sure how they tabulate that percentage, and I'd be willing to bet it doesn't accurately reflect how the people who are paid to cover the game of college football actually see this game. I'm guessing far less than 42.4% of the so-called experts are picking Ohio State to win this game. But at least ESPN seems to think Ohio State has a puncher's chance. So I recorded a primer podcast on Christmas Day with a bunch of the key stats that we always mention in these matchups. So I'm not going to regurgitate too many of those numbers today. If you're interested in diving into that stuff, I invite you to check out that pod. So gents, let's get right to it. I'd like to know where each of you sees advantages for Ohio State on both sides of the ball in this game, as well as where you may have concerns on each side of the ball. PVH, I'm going to start with you. Give me your view of the Ohio State offense against the Georgia defense. Where do you see advantages for the Buckeyes in that matchup, and what are your concerns?
Yeah, good pod, by the way.
Thanks, buddy.
Somewhat depressing on Christmas Day, I have to say. I didn't come out of it feeling all warm and fuzzy about our chances, and curious of your concernometer, but that's okay. That's okay. Dude, it's, advantages. We know where the advantages are. If they have a weakness, it's their secondary, and one team's been able to exploit it, and nobody's been able to run on them. To me, dude, I've been all over the map on this. Chad's all over my ass for being too negative. Other than the night when USC won that game, I haven't been super excited about this game. And I don't know, maybe that's a good sign, right? Contrarian sign. But to me, dude, I think they run the ball. And if I'm Ryan Day, this is what I would do. My first possession, and it looks like it's going to be Hayden, which makes me very happy. I'm on the record here, or hopefully, who knows? I could be totally wrong about that also. I'd run the ball. I'd run the ball 3 times up the middle and just see what the fuck happens. And I think that would accomplish 2 things. Number 1, it's going to say something to your team and your offensive line that I believe in you, and we're not afraid, and we're not going to back down. And it's going to break a tendency of what everyone thinks Ohio State could or should do. And I think they can have success. I have a sneaking suspicion that when you play injured running backs for a whole season, maybe your run game has been, somewhat marginalized, underutilized. I don't know. Call me effing crazy. So I don't think he'll do it. But that's what I would do. I would come out, I would run the ball straight up the middle 3 times, even if it's 3rd and 3. And if you don't get it, you punt, and then, maybe you go to plan B. But if you can have success by doing that, then it will totally open up the passing game, and it'll totally open up play action. Because I think what's happened the last few games, going back to Iowa, is teams are they're saying, look, you're not going to beat us over the top. We're going to take Harrison away. Right. And so it's going to have to be somebody else. And Ibuka's good, but he's not Harrison. He's certainly not Olave. He's certainly not Wilson. One guy, take away what Ohio State wants to do. If I know where the weakness is, I was, talking to my dad about this, and we were laughing. It's like the Georgia secondary, and, our strength against their, if I know that, Ryan Day knows that. Well, guess who else knows that? Kirby Smart knows that. And so does Will Muschamp. They know that. So don't you think they're going to come up with something to take that away and make those guys come up and not just sit back in too deep? And then you can have success with the passing game. But if you can't run the ball, it's going to be tough sledding, even though I know they're very, very hard to run against. That's what I would do.
I like it. Just to your point, Paige, what we've learned over the last couple of days is that Mayan Williams is not participating in practices. He did not participate today. He was absent. They're saying he's, quote, under the weather. We don't know what that means. He was supposed to be interviewed, I believe it was yesterday, and instead they sent Chip Trainum in his place. And the word is today that, yes, Dallin Hayden was practicing with the first team at running back. I just want to throw that in there as we're talking about the Ohio State run game. So you like Ohio State to come out, try and punch Georgia right in the mouth, right where their strength is, running the football, and see if you can have some early success that will open things up in the pass game. How about UCP? How do you see this matchup of Ohio State versus the Georgia defense? What will you be watching for?
Well, I think we come out immediately throwing screen passes and a couple
oh no,
outs down the sidelines
to Mayan Williams.
You know what? I've been a big fan, big backer of Ryan Day. I'm not quite sure what happened where the playing not to lose kind of playbook started to come into into the scene.
After the bye week, I think we started to see a shift in the play calling. I think that's just my opinion. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you're probably right, but you know what? I think he knows that. I think he's been told that. I think it's been brought to his attention more than once. So I think that, play calling is going to be a lot different than what it's been. We will need to establish the run game. Obviously that Georgia front seven is pretty, they're loaded.
Yeah.
But I mean, that offensive line is not, they're not like a MAC
top liver.
Like offensive
they're not
line.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. They're one of the top offensive lines in the country. So I think those guys, I mean, I could think they've just been like harped on. They've been like, trying to get as close to the unit as possible. And I feel like, to Paige's point, we established the run game. I don't know about 3 right up the gut, right out of the gate, but I mean, maybe the first couple. I don't want it to get like our first series. I don't want it to be third and 9. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I agree. We definitely have to establish. I do not want to see one fucking screen pass in that goddamn game. Not one. I would be so happy if we didn't. But I mean, I think that's a lot of time to evaluate. I mean, you look at what a couple of teams have done on, Georgia this year. I mean, LSU for that matter. Like, I mean, they put up I don't know how many passing yards.
Over 500 yards LSU did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's not like, we can play with these guys. I mean, that's the bottom line. And, going back to what Paige said earlier, I really haven't been, engulfed in, after the Michigan game, I kind of went into a, just kind of like
depression.
Numbness.
How many times did you call the suicide hotline?
No, I was like, hey, I'm going to need to speak to Mary at least 15 times. And Mary was like, I think she took vacation for 2 weeks. It's like, just because she was calling.
Took so many calls from Chad.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Chad again.
But I'm excited, man. I think, I think he's going to he's going to make some, and I said this at Michigan, he's going to open up the playbook, but like, I mean, obviously he didn't. That was some of the worst play calling that we've seen. We know he can manage a game with good play calling. And it seems like the last 2 or 3 games, it just went, like, as you said, after the bye, it just went like, what the fuck is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think that he's had a little, few very deep looks at himself while brushing the teeth and realizes he's got to get back to, you know, why he is, you know, an offensive, so-called guru. So I think we're going to see some different things in this game, and I'm excited.
I like it. I like it. So I want to hit on 2 things that each of you hit on. You know, and I said it on the Christmas Day pod, and I'm not going to belabor it here, but my primary concern is how well the interior of the Ohio State offensive line holds up against Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter. And we're now learning that right guard Matthew Jones looks to be healthy. He was seen in full pads and running with the first unit in videos of Ohio State practices today. Kevin Wilson said yesterday that Jones has been healthy and practicing. So if he is indeed available and can play, well, then Ohio State has a chance to be at its best on the offensive line. Now, whether, you know, their best is going to be enough against Jalen Carter and that Georgia defensive front, we shall see. But that is some good news that we've gotten this week on that front.
Did he play against Michigan, or was he out?
He was out. Yeah, he did not play. He was injured in the Maryland game. Now, second to that, and CP, this is kind of echoing what you've said, and this is probably more important, and that is the offensive game plan and play calling from Ryan Day. Day's play calling, and also I think the use of some of his personnel. Again, in my view, this is after the bye week when I started to notice it, and down the home stretch of the regular season, seemed to really lack any identifiable plan. Right? I mean, how many more failed toss sweeps with Mayan Williams to the boundary and blown up bubble screens to Emeka Egbuka do we have to watch before Day is finally convinced those plays just aren't very well suited to his personnel? And
We've hit our quota.
Right. Same. I've hit my quota. Overload. That's for sure. And it's a moot point at this stage because he's injured and he's not going to play. But why wait until the penultimate game of the regular season to get Trey Henderson involved in the passing game? I mean, Henderson had 23 receptions for 285 yards and 4 touchdowns last year as a receiver. This season, he had 4 receptions for 28 yards. And, you know, why are you throwing to Cade Stover on 4th down against Michigan when you have Marvin Harrison Jr.? Why does Dallin Hayden only get 2 carries against Michigan after rushing for 143 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half against Maryland the week before? PVH, you were all over that in the last pod, you know, after that game. So I just didn't. It's right. I mean, these are curious, head-scratching decisions, both on the play calling front and the use of his personnel. And it just didn't really feel like Day had opposing defenses on their heels as much after the bye week as he did before. And Day did seem to kind of lose his feel for the game as a play caller down the stretch. And if that continues against Georgia, they're going to get run out of the building. So to your point, CP, you've already made this point. Day has to have a better plan and call a much better game than he did over the last half of the regular season. I really hope he's used the last 5 weeks, to his advantage, right? He's had some time to work that stuff out. PVH, I want to kick this back to you. Anything else you want to mention about the Ohio State offense against the Georgia defense?
One of the things you said, like in a game like this, you go to your best players and Harrison Jr. and don't throw to Cade Stover.
Yes.
I kind of feel like you can take a guy away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and I said this before, opposing defenses have done that and Day hasn't adjusted to it. And
right.
We've seen him be stubborn in the past. There's somebody, hopefully, right? We're going to need more than Marvin Harrison Jr.
For sure.
Right. And the other thing is, people are like, well, CJ's got to play out of his head and blah. No, I think CJ's just got to play a good game. Right. Don't try and be a hero. Just play a good game.
Mm-hmm.
If there's 6 yards, on a broken pass play, take the 6 yards, right? We're going to need him to do that.
Yeah.
I don't expect
take those checkdowns. Those checkdowns.
We're going to have those to keep, possession of the ball, move the chains. And the other point, which was, you were spot on this, stop the fucking penalties, right?
Oh God.
Like the drive killing penalties. Like,
oh my God.
It's 1st and 15, we were life and death when it was Maryland. Against Georgia, we're done,
Right.
So if the over under on false starts for Dwan Jones is, 2.5 and we go over on that, we're probably going to lose this game because we haven't shown the ability to overcome them and, get a first down.
Right.
They're going to have to play, they're not going to have to play a perfect game. CJ's not going to have to be superhuman. We've got the skilled players. We've got the talent to play. Just play a good game, play a sound good game, call a good game. And someone else, Harrison and CJ Stroud, like that's, that's table stakes. Those guys have to have good games, be factors in this game. And give me one or two other guys. Maybe it's Ibuka. Maybe it is Cade Stover, or Hayden or something else.
Maybe Julian Fleming finally comes out of hibernation, right? Totally. I mean, where the hell has he been? We haven't heard from him since the Iowa game. Yeah. I mean, it's been 2 months since he's caught a touchdown, but yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I guess the point that I made on the Christmas Day pod was lean on the guys who got you here, and, don't leave us wondering what could have been if only we would have gone more to Marvin Harrison Jr. I personally think Harrison Jr. needs 15 to 20 targets in this game. I don't know if you remember against Penn State, he had about that many targets, and he converted on several huge third downs for them. And I'd rather go down swinging with my best players. And if we're just not good enough, okay, fine. But I just would hate to feel like, to wonder what could have been if only we would have gone to Harrison Jr. more, if only we could have gone to Ibuka more, and instead of throwing multiple times on key fourth downs to Cade Stover, who, again, no disrespect to Stover. He's had a hell of a season. He has far exceeded expectations, but he's a role player. He's not one of your stars. Make sure the stars shine in games like this. You win games like this with your stars, I guess was the point I was trying to make. Anyway, go ahead,
and
PBH.
That's a fair point. No, and absolutely, they're going to have big games, but we're going to need more than that. Right?
Yes, I agree with that too.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just think they're, I think teams look at Ohio State and they say, that's the guy we're going to take away. And, I don't go back and watch film and, God knows I could never watch that Michigan game. If you paid me $1 million.
You and me both, my friend.
Not a chance.
But, I just kind of wonder, if teams have just sort of decided, hey, we're going to take this player away. We're going to make these. And if these other guys can beat us, then, then fine. We tip our hat.
Well, we have the talent to have those players step up and do that. One thing I will say that I stood this out on the thread the other night, that Stroud is going to have to play a game that he's letting this all out there. The NFL draft, fuck that. I've got to go out there and win this game. I have a chance to unscathe my legacy by beating Georgia and going to the national championship. And he needs to lay it all out there.
It does feel like we've not seen enough playmaking from CJ Stroud, in these last few games. I mean, he's making throws from the pocket, and we know he's as good as anybody in the country at doing that. But and it doesn't necessarily mean taking off and running for 20 yards. It might be making some, evading pressure and making some really difficult throws on the run, as he did against Notre Dame. Remember some of the throws he made on the run, on the sidelines, the one to Mayan Williams in the fourth quarter of that game, in the late going to extend a drive. It does feel like he's been a little short on the playmaking front, right? He certainly was against Michigan. I mean, his stat line looked fine, for the most part. I think he threw for over 350 yards, but, I think even he would tell you he didn't make enough plays.
By no means am I trying to, expect him to go out there and be Jesus Christ superstar or anything like that. Like Paige said, I mean, you don't have to have the game of your life, but just like you said,
well, that would be nice if he did.
I mean, it would be nice. Hey, this is a Heisman finalist we're talking about, though, and that's the type of player I think that CJ Stroud would tell you he aspires to be. So I don't think that's asking too much, CP. I mean, I think go out and make plays. Go out and show the world why you're one of the country's best quarterbacks, why you're going to be a first-round draft pick in whatever it is, 3 or 4 months. Go out and make those plays.
If you think about it, not to interrupt you, he had probably played his last game as a Buckeye after Michigan.
I agree with that.
He's not going to play in a bowl game. He wouldn't have played. He did not. Does he strike you as the type of guy that's going to play in a bowl game?
No.
Maybe
Orange
he would.
Bowl,
but
he's not playing.
He's not playing. So, if Ryan Day's getting a second life. So CJ Stroud, I don't know if there's anything on the line for him, as far as impressing scouts. And I mean, I suppose he could, really, move up in the draft from, a top 10 player to, maybe a top 3 player if he just crushes if he gets by Georgia and he wins a national championship and just plays out of his head. I guess,
but the motivation has to be more than that, right? He has to care about his legacy. And I think he does. To me, he strikes me as a player who cares about his legacy, the legacy that he leaves behind here at Ohio State. And I
candidly don't know if I believe that.
Oh,
maybe
okay.
He does a little bit. I think we as fans want them to really want it more than,
of course,
maybe that we want it. I'm sure he doesn't feel, great about being 0-2 against Michigan, but when he cashes that first check and he gets $15 million deposited in his bank account, because he's now an NFL quarterback, I think he's going to be okay. Right.
Right.
Like Cardale Jones gets to go to Barnes's, tailgate now because he's a national championship winning quarterback. I think he would rather, still be cashing NFL checks.
Shotgun.
So but I do think it's interesting that, he's getting a second life here. He's not probably playing another game in a Buckeye uniform unless USC knocks off or gets knocked off by Utah.
It's a good point.
What do you do with it?
Yeah.
CJ, I don't know. I'm like, we don't live in his head. He's a pretty stoic guy, he's not from Ohio, he's from California. And I think maybe that's part of what's missing from this team is a little bit of that Ohio dog, right? Like the Darren Lees of the world, that are just going to run through a brick wall. That maybe that's CJ. I'm not quite sure. We haven't seen.
It's a question he needs to answer. He strikes me as a guy who cares about his legacy and really does want to leave something special behind at Ohio State before he moves on to the next level. I could be wrong about that, but we're about to find out because Georgia will draw that out of him, very early in this game, I would assume. Gents, anything else you want to say about the Ohio State offense against the Georgia defense before we flip it around?
No,
Who's your X factor player?
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. Okay. CP, I'll let you answer that question. You go first.
I'm going to go as a unit, and I'm going to say the O-line.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. If we believe that Ohio State can have some success running the ball, then I'm going to say Dallin Hayden is my X factor. How about you, PBH?
I would say Hayden too, but since you took him, I'm going to go with Ibuka.
Have
a big game.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people forget about him. This guy who, had over 1,000 receiving yards himself and upwards of 8 or 9 receiving touchdowns. Yeah. And he's a versatile guy.
Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to switch that. I'm going to take. I'm going with Fleming. I'm taking CP's boy.
Fleming. Okay.
Fleming. What an opportunity for that guy to change the narrative.
Yeah, change the narrative, and boy, I tell you, it would be just in the nick of time. I was about to put him on a milk carton because where the hell has he been? Right?
I love the milk carton.
The milk carton.
But you know what?
For the next pod, who's the milk carton? Who's your milk carton Buckeye player?
He was balling out until we got to. There was like a dramatic fall off, but like up until that, man, he was making plays.
I think he had a streak of 4 or 5 consecutive games with a touchdown catch, but his last touchdown catch was against Iowa.
Oh God.
It's been a long time. And then he started getting the dropsies and, he's a forgotten man in the offense. And,
he should be a factor in the offense with Ibuka and Harrison, right? Like he should be is he in the slot?
No, he's on the outside. Ibuka's the slot. Ibuka's in the slot.
That call, dude.
Yeah.
I really like that call.
Possession receiver, man, like 8 yards, like we don't need home runs every single time. Just move the chains.
See, now I would argue the opposite of that. I think Fleming's real value is stretching the field as a deep threat, as a big guy who can go up and take balls away from smaller defensive backs. And I think that's what, that's the position he plays. He's meant to be the guy who's supposed to take the top off a defense. Ibuka's your possession guy out of the slot. But either way, I'll take whatever Julian Fleming can fucking give me. I'll take it. Whether it's, just moving the chains on first down or something, an 80-yard touchdown catch, I'll take it.
Before we move off the offense, though, I do want to say one thing, and you guys can take this with a grain of salt, but Mayan Williams will be playing on Saturday night.
I hope you're right.
You heard it here.
Okay. I said this over text. I just don't know how I could have any faith in that, given how injuries have gone in the running back room this year. And it's a bad sign. It's Wednesday. The game's in fucking 3 days, CP, and he didn't even practice today. So that's a bad sign. But you could be right. I'm not saying that, I want to try and be positive about this as well. But the positivity for me has to be grounded in reality. And he's not, he's been in and out of the lineup. Williams has the entire second half of the season. I mean, what makes you say that? Do you have some intel?
I just feel like, I read a quote from Chip.
Train him?
And yep. And it just makes me feel like that he's going to be good to go.
What was the quote?
I mean, like verbatim, I think I'm gonna get like
he's under the weather. It sounds like he has a cold.
That's what they say, under the weather, but
so basically in a nutshell,
do you believe anything Ohio State says about injuries? No. I don't believe a fucking word they say about injuries. Look, if he's on the field and Ohio State's first possession of the game, then I'll believe he's playing. Until then, he wasn't at practice today. This is 3 days before the game. That's not a good sign.
Regardless, like you said, I'm gonna jump on with you guys. Hayden, Dallin proved that the guy can carry a load. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got Chip, a short yardage.
Chip training was good against Michigan, man.
Yes,
he was good against Michigan. That was another thing that was so frustrating about that game is Ryan Day went away from him in the second half. But I thought Trainum was really, really good in the first half of that game. All right, fellas, if we're done talking about the Ohio State offense against the Georgia defense, let's flip it around. PBH, I'll start with you. Do you see any advantages for the Buckeye defense against Georgia, and what are your concerns?
No, in the secondary, right? It's pretty. So it's been our concern all year long. Missed tackle. Just play a good game, Again, to your point, don't have missed tackles, when you're an all-out blitz situation and have a 8-yard hitch go for a touchdown. That shit can't happen, right? Mm-hmm. We'll lose if that happens. I think, we might have an advantage. I mean, if Hall's healthy, Harrison could have a big game. Hamilton,
Tuimoloau,
JTT, Jack Sawyer, right?
Sawyer's playing better as well.
Yeah, Teron Vincent, come on, boys, you're all 4 and 5 star, and most of you are 5-star, right? You're gonna have to play a great game, and play like they played in the first half against Michigan, and don't have those mistakes.
Yeah.
Georgia's gonna put up points, right? We're just gonna have to, deal with it. If there's any advantage, I think it would be those guys. But they're going up against a great offensive line.
Yeah, and they play 12 personnel most of the game too, with an extra tight end, right? They have 2 giant tight ends. It's just hard to get pressure on them, on Stetson Bennett, because they're in 12 personnel the whole game with an extra tight end.
So let's go back to one of our I don't know, axioms or our. If you're best offensive player, and in this case, it's ironic because it doesn't hold water, but if your best offensive player is a tight end, right? What are we really talking about? Well, unfortunately, they have 2 that are probably better than Gronkowski, so it probably doesn't hold water. However, I was thinking about that the other day. It kind of makes me laugh. It's can we take away their, tight, it's a tight end, right?
Brock Bowers, he's a player. Yeah, I would argue that Brock Bowers is a wide receiver masquerading as a tight end. I mean, he has wide receiver speed. But no, I agree with you. This is what I think in one instance where maybe that axiom doesn't hold true. I'd say he's a much better Jeremy Ruckert. I think he's, legit. I mean, he's the John Mackey Award winner. He's, somehow he's only a second team AP All-American. Notre Dame's Michael Mayer was a first team according to the AP, whatever.
So I actually have a question, not that, you usually quarterback these things.
Sure.
So maybe I'll kick this to Chad.
Right.
Do we think that Knowles is going to call a different defense, right? Because to your point, you've said this a lot of times, right? He goes for broke in certain situations and he lives with some big plays.
Right.
Do we think he changes that philosophy for this game?
I don't think he changes the way he's coached for the last, 30 years.
I tend to agree. I think Knowles is who he is, and he's going to coach up his players to execute better in the moment. And I
do you think he can be a better coach and not have Cam Martinez on the field? Is that possible?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think maybe they situationally, when they're talking about, substitutions and that sort of thing, he's got to be more mindful of who he has on the field and what he for sure. I mean, I think, there were moments.
So you're saying we're going to live with some 2 or 3 big plays.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think that's how he makes his bones as a defensive coordinator. That's how he's made his reputation. And while it was a catastrophic failure of scheme and execution against Michigan, it was just one game. And if you look at the other 2 opponents that Ohio State played that had good offensive skill players, Penn State and Maryland, the scheme did actually have some positive returns. They forced, I think it was 5 turnovers and 8 quarterback sacks in the two games combined, and that included 2 defensive scores. So, I think he's going to look at the averages and say, okay, bad day. We didn't execute as well as we could have. Maybe I could have called a better game, but scheme-wise, I think he believes in his scheme.
Right, and I had read an interesting quote, just to kind of which is perfect for, what we're discussing right now. But he said, well, there may have been a couple instances where if in a magic 8 ball, which I love the magic 8 ball, I could go back and change it. Other times I wouldn't change that call. I mean, he's going to still make those calls, man. He's going to blitz, there's a couple
I personally felt like he did not have enough respect for the Michigan skill players. Right. And I think had he had an appropriate level of fear for the Michigan skill players and for J.J. McCarthy, he may have called a slightly less aggressive game. He might have done a better job of mixing up his coverages, disguising his pressures. And I think we'll see that against Georgia. That's where I think he'll modify things, PVH. It helps that, Ohio State defensively is probably going to be a little healthier. If you've got a Mike Hall Jr. wreaking havoc in the middle of that defensive line, as we think he probably can, as we've seen him do when he's healthy, that could be a game changer. But dude, I mean, what's the alternative?
The X Factor milk carton defensive player.
Right. Well, how many times were we texting throughout the beginning of the season, in the first few games, even before he got hurt, oh my God, this dude is.
I was at the Notre Dame game. I was at the Notre Dame game, and he was a presence on the field. Even when he didn't make the tackle, I mean, he was the pressure that he was putting on Notre Dame's quarterback. And by the way, that's a good Notre Dame offensive line. Huge. So I think if he's healthy and can actually, do what he can do, bringing pressure up the middle, that's certainly going to help. But no, I don't think Noel's going to change his stripes at this stage of the game. Maybe he makes slight modifications. They're going to give up some plays, right?
Yeah,
Georgia's got good skilled players, and Ohio State's going to take some chances, and we have to hope that the scheme is going to produce a couple of sacks, maybe 1 or 2 turnovers. In a game like this, it doesn't take much to tip the scales. Maybe it's just one, a pick 6, one key play where that scheme, the aggressiveness, the pressure they put on Stetson Bennett makes a difference. But I mean, the alternative is you lay back and you let Bennett pick you apart, because he's a pretty accurate quarterback, and you give him easy throws to his tight ends and running backs. Fuck, that's where he wants to throw the ball anyway.
Yeah, all day long.
All day long, right?
Yards,
so I mean,
yards.
I think you can't let that happen, and you have to be aggressive. You just pick your poison, and I think they're going to go with the scheme that has the potential to produce some explosive plays on your side of the ledger.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. And our DBs, it's more they're just out of position, and it's I you can only coach that so much, but I feel like you give them 5 weeks, man. Knowles has had a lot of Cubans, some Tupac, Biggie, and some DMX just ripping there, just watching film for the last 5 weeks, man. I'm rooting, I mean, if the over under for me getting up and throwing shit and God damn it, what the, right. I'm going to be so happy.
Yeah. My big concern on this side of the ball is, and PVH, you referenced it earlier, penalties. I mean, high penalties, mental mistakes. Ohio State committed a combined 28 penalties for 232 yards against Maryland, Penn State, and Michigan. And I mention those opponents because those are the three opponents that had the best skill talent Ohio State faced in the regular season. And many of those were costly penalties by the Buckeye defense. So, for example, Ronnie Hickman's pass interference in the end zone on 3rd and 10 on a desperation heave by J.J. McCarthy, giving Michigan a fresh set of downs at the Ohio State 2-yard line. Penalties gave Penn State new life 2 different times on their go-ahead scoring drive in the fourth quarter of that game. You remember that, guys? A pass interference on 3rd and 16, and then a defensive illegal formation on a missed field goal by Penn State that allowed them another crack at converting the first down and keeping the drive alive. And then you have Tommy Eichenberg having, Katron Allen dead to rights in the backfield on 4th and goal, but can't bring him down. Allen scores. Penn State takes the lead. So blown coverages and poor tackling in the secondary, that's another thing we just talked about that led to quick and easy points for the opponent, both against Penn State and Michigan. And then against Maryland, you had Lathan Ransom dropping an interception in the end zone. The Terps would end up scoring a couple plays later on that drive. So the Ohio State defense has to limit penalties, coverage mistakes, and missed tackles. They got to seize their opportunities when they get them. And if Ohio State can limit those things, both on defense and offense, then I think they have a real chance here, guys. I mean, Georgia didn't really have to sweat in its 2 biggest games of the season. I'm talking about Tennessee and then LSU in the SEC title game, because penalties, mental mistakes, and missed opportunities by those opponents helped Georgia build big first half leads. I mean, Tennessee had 8 pre-snap penalties against Georgia. 8.
Yeah.
I mean, LSU gave Georgia a free touchdown to start the SEC title game on a blocked field goal attempt. The entire LSU special teams walked off the field on the play, not realizing it was still a live ball. And Georgia's safeties, Christopher Smith, he scoops up the ball, runs it all the way back completely untouched for free 6 points. So it's that kind of shit, right, that Ohio State has to eliminate. And if they do,
I will say, yeah, go ahead. I'm
sorry. So, and if they do, look, and if it's 14-10 at the half instead of 24-6, then that puts pressure on Georgia to have to execute in the second half. And the longer the game is close, the more of a chance I give Ohio State. So that's where I have concerns, but also I can see, a path for Ohio State to win this game if they can eliminate that shit.
I'm like as harsh a critic on these defensive backs that there is, but a lot of these penalties, they're right there. Mm-hmm. The coverage is there. Turn your fucking head towards the ball. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so just.
Yeah.
There's been most of those penalties is like because they just aren't looking. They're right with them stride for stride, but turn around. You know what I mean? You're going to get thrown. You're going to get the canvas every time.
Yep.
Turn around.
Whatever you need to do. Georgia's good enough. Right? It's going to be tough enough to beat them without making those mistakes. So don't help them out like LSU did, like Tennessee did.
2, don't give us back to offensive line. Don't move us back to 3rd and 7. You know what I mean? Just on the same side of the ball.
Look, I just want to see what Georgia is when they're not front running, right? When they've not been given a 24-6, second quarter lead because the other team has, 8 pre-snap penalties. Right? Make them execute. And then we'll see what they're actually made of. I don't really think they've had to be I don't think they've really been all that tested in their biggest games of the season. That's just my view. PVH, how about you? Anything else you want to say about the Ohio State defense against the Georgia offense?
Yeah. I mean, I think we can expect a big game out of our defensive line. I think that, they are clearly, the strongest part of our defense. Zach Harrison, JTT, Sawyer, they're going to have to wreak havoc. And if they can do that, and if they can get, Bennett sort of, maybe not rattled, but off his mark, then we have a fighting chance. And again, you're right. It's the penalties and the mistakes. Because probably don't have enough to overcome that again against a team like Georgia. What would the Ohio State Michigan result either, right?
No, of course not. What would the Ohio State Michigan result have been without penalties and mental mistakes?
Yeah,
I mean,
a very different scenario.
I just, so I eliminate that stuff. Now the problem is it's been an issue all season, and I think that's part of the reason why we've not seen Ohio State put together a 4-quarter performance probably all season. I mean, maybe the Wisconsin game was the most dominant kind of end-to-end performance that we saw from Ohio State. And then I don't think we saw anything like that since.
if you go back and look at Georgia's games over the last, they've been given gifts. Like if Ohio State, like, let's just say, like, if we can just cut those stupid fucking mental mistakes, those penalties in half, we're in this game, like to the very end.
It's interesting, the psyche of this team, because it seems like all season it's just been a clunky ride, right?
I agree.
And they have not put it together, right? They've just not played. And, it might be, one thing in this game or another thing in that game. But you always say you want to be playing your best football in November, right? Which clearly they weren't. So can they turn it around, right? And it would kind of be I think, in my mind, somewhat unprecedented. But you go back to the 2014 team. You didn't think they started that. What were they, 14th after?
I think they were like 16th in the first college football playoff rankings, if I'm not mistaken.
You get that life. Like, can they do it? Can they just put it all together? And again, I don't think they have to play a perfect game. Just play a good game. You could beat that team. And even if you play a good game, it'll be a competitive game, and they can definitely hang. I think the psyche of the whole thing is kind of interesting too. Ryan Day included, the coaching included, like Jim Knowles, like, welcome to the Michigan rivalry, right? Like, somewhat humble pie. Can they, as a collective coaching and, playing team, put it all together when the stakes are the highest? And, the funny part is nobody's giving them a chance, but who is giving them a chance? Vegas at 7 points. That's a chance, right? Like, if you were to think, we should be a double digit, dog in this game. We're not, right? So just put it together, Ohio State. I don't know if they can. I think the psyche is, an interesting factor, X factor. You can't really put your finger on that kind of stuff, but maybe they can do it.
Well, they need to look no further than their opponent, the team across from them. Georgia last year, right? They laid a egg. They shit the bed in the SEC title game against Bama. Bama was their Michigan, right? And they blew it. And they were able to back in as Ohio State this year as kind of a quote unquote at large. And they were able to right the ship. So it's possible. We've seen it before. We saw Bama win it as a non-champ a few years ago, right after a bad late season loss. I think it was to Auburn or something. So it's possible. And the question is Ryan Day in the right,
buddy? Anything.
Yeah. All right. So, hey, look, on that note, let's fire up the Concernometer. PVH, give us your Concernometer score for this game.
Oh, I'm going to turn on the light for that. Dude,
what happened to the light, bro? You were getting
I got this hydroponic, and it's actually not for marijuana. I'm growing my own lettuce, and that light turned off. So that's what that was.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I should have romaine and some butter lettuce here in a couple
You're
weeks.
Colorado through and through, my friend.
Right on, Johnny. Right on.
Hey, dude, psychedelics are legal here, so probably the next thing is going to be
Yes.
Yes. Children listen to this podcast, John. Children.
Oh, hey, my nephews. What's up, guys?
Yeah. Can we not? We have to be at least above an 8, right? Everybody 9 or 10. Like, there's no. So I'm a 9.
You're a 9.
9.5. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. 9 for you. How about you, CP?
7.5.
7.5. Okay. Yeah. Okay. For me, it's a 10, of course. And I think I've already made my case for why it should be a 10. I mean, the lack of an identifiable plan on offense over the second half of the season, a play caller in Ryan Day, who seems to have lost his mojo, a defense that's been entirely too boom or bust and made too many mistakes against the best offensive skill talent it faced during the regular season, an opponent in Georgia, the defending national champs, who'll be playing a veritable home game just 70 miles from their campus. So for me, it's a 10.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I change my Concernometer real quick?
Sure.
Because I came into this all day long saying I was going to be a 10, and I'm going to switch from 7.5 to a 10.
You're going to 10. And okay. All right.
Do I believe that we can win the game? Yes, but I am going to go like a 10.
Okay.
It is what it is.
So we have 2 10s. We have 2 10s. And PVH, what are you, 8.5?
No, I'm a 9. But
you're 9.
Kind of playing with house money too. Like, maybe we should have the same mindset the team should have, right? Like, we shouldn't be here, right? Like, you shouldn't,
2014, baby.
Like maybe we should be at 2. What do we got to lose? What do you have to fucking lose? You could be playing in the Rose Bowl against, UCLA.
Yeah.
Just let it hang out. And be 2.
Absolutely. Let it hang out. For sure. There's a lot to lose here, though. I mean, especially for Ryan Day, reputationally, there's a ton to lose. A loss, however it comes, would still be extremely disappointing. And I don't know that we are necessarily playing with house money. I mean, I actually feel like we should be here. That was the goal all along. I mean, we are one of the top 4 teams in the country. I mean, who are you going to put in instead of Ohio State, right? Not Bama with 2 losses, not Tennessee. Beyond those 2, no one else had an argument. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, right? I mean, 2014, I think, was a bit of a different animal. That's Alabama. That's Nick Saban. Now, that's a dude who's got like more rings than fingers, so that was truly playing with house money. We were true underdogs in that game. I don't know if we're looking at the same kind of underdog matchup against Georgia.
I'll tell you what, though, those like unis we're going to be fucking wearing Saturday night are sick.
Yeah, they're sick, but also we were wearing the same unis when those same unis when Alabama just beat the shit out of us in the 2020 national title game. Wow. Unis are great. Go out and fucking make plays. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. No shit.
Yeah, I don't give a shit what uniforms you're wearing. I don't care. Go out and make plays.
Well, those stats mean shit, dude. Like the last time we were number 4. We won the national championship.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Urban Meyer, the master motivator, was the coach of that team, though. And I just have questions about whether Ryan Day can get his team up for that. Anyway, okay, listen, it's time for score predictions, boys. Let's go to those. PBH, I want to go to you. What's your score prediction for this game?
30-28, dude. We find a way.
30-28. I love it. We find a way. Anything else you want to elaborate on there?
I mean, it all goes back to what we talked about in this pod, right? I don't think CJ has to be superhuman. Play a great game. We're going to need an X factor, Fleming or somebody, just no penalties.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them less than 8, right?
Half.
We'll probably, we'll look back on it. It's like if you have more than 8 penalties and, you're starting 2 drives, at 1st and 15 or, 1st and, 20 from a holding call. Right? Like maybe holding calls
or false starts. Yeah,
right?
they could
starts.
be. Yeah, the false starts.
Any of those things, right? Like, like our friend Robert De Niro, and good I can't have it.
Henry, I can't have it.
Henry,
I can't have it.
Can't have it. So that's and then make some plays on defense, right? Like and live with, they're gonna make plays, right? They're gonna score points, right? If we can limit them to, 4 touchdowns, we score 4 touchdowns and get a safety, we win. We walk out of there with a W. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
All right, Jenny. I love it. So 30-28 PVH is your.
You got it.
All right. Okay.
All touchdowns, 1 safety.
The safety is the difference in the game. Okay. I love it. All right. How about you, CP?
Guys, as I led off with the podcast, you've been given an opportunity here, guys. Shouldn't be here. Got embarrassed by Michigan at home. The game wasn't as bad as it was. It's the same, but it doesn't, regardless. There's been an opportunity given to you, and it is time to figure out the way to grab that and embrace it and breathe it, live it, and take down the number 1 team pretty much from wire to wire this entire season. We have the fucking talent. We have the personnel. We can fucking do it. And we're going to. I feel like they're going to reach up and grab that, whatever's in front of their face, and they're just going to just take it. And we're going to win this game 35-31. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, great. And the sound effects of CP pounding his desk coming through on the podcast just to hammer home this point.
Doing a Martin King speech there.
Yeah,
all right.
Totally. Should we send that to Ryan? Maybe he would just play that in the locker room before.
I would kill to go on that. Like if that was like if I
Chad, you gonna go address the team? Give him a pep talk?
Somebody told me like I had 15 days to live, whatever. I mean, one of the things I'd be like, let me get in that locker room right now. I mean, like a little bit more than 15 days, but you know what I mean.
Do you know who the honorary captain is for Ohio State in this game?
I do not.
You do not?
Mm-mm.
Mike Doss.
Mike Doss.
Honorary captain.
Ken Crippler?
Bro, Sloaner's like just
I love it.
doing jumping jacks in the living room right now in Brooklyn. Hey, and I got to give one props out real quick, before you give yours. Like,
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Shout out to Mikey Corcoran for like just being like positive this week. I love it.
Yeah,
it made me smile every day.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad that you brought that up, CP, because I actually was thinking about Mike Corcoran's comments on our text thread yesterday when I thought about my score prediction. I've already mentioned it, right? According to the 24/7 Team Talent Composite, Georgia is number 2, Ohio State's number 3. Georgia has one more 5-star than we do, one more 4-star than we do. It's basically a draw when it comes to talent. And PVH, to your question about whether, that's Ohio State just top heavy at receiver in those 5-stars, actually, that is not the case. 10 of those 5-stars for Ohio State are non-receivers. And, we've already talked about, how Ohio State, well, technically they're an underdog, but it is a little deceptive. As Pat Forty likes to say, it was a dress-up deception for Ohio State as an underdog. And as Mike Corcoran said yesterday on our text thread, the Dogs are good, but they got one national championship since 1980. They've only won the SEC twice during the playoff era. They have 5 SEC titles since 1982. 5 SEC titles in 40 years. And this is only their 3rd playoff appearance. ESPN just published a piece entitled "How Kirby Smart Built Georgia into College Football's Next Dynasty." I sent you guys a screenshot of that yesterday. And the ESPN College Football Twitter account just tweeted their final score prediction for the national championship game. Georgia 37, Michigan 24. So could it be that maybe we're assuming a little too much about Georgia? I mean, I know they're in the same conference as Alabama. They're not Alabama. They're not Alabama. This is not the same matchup as it was in 2014, Ohio State versus that Alabama juggernaut, or 2020 versus that Alabama juggernaut. This is a good Georgia team. No question about it. Like they deserve their share of the respect. They are the defending national champions. They're the SEC champs. But it does feel a little bit like maybe they're getting a little too much respect. And the other thing I was thinking, could it be that we're living in a world, and we just don't know it yet, where the Big Ten, at least for one season, has closed the gap on the SEC, and it's actually Michigan and Ohio State that are the 2 best teams in the country?
Well, so to that point, that was just sitting there having coffee with Joe this morning. He's like, that'd be pretty ironic if Ohio State and Michigan played, all the freaking grief that the Big Ten gets.
Yeah.
If that, and by the way, it's not that implausible.
No, it's not implausible at all. No, I don't think so. I agree with you. I mean, Michigan is favored in their game, and Ohio State is less than a touchdown underdog in this game. And we've already gone through all the reasons where Ohio State, matches up pretty well. So look, I think Ohio State can win this game. I just wish I had more faith in Ryan Day.
And no, I was on the edge with you, Z. Just stay right there.
hold on a second, CP. So I just don't know if he's ready for this moment. I'm not saying he's not. I just don't know, and I need to see it. I mean, he hasn't won a big game since the 2020 playoff semifinal against Clemson. The Rose Bowl win was nice, beating Utah, but let's face it. I mean, he hasn't won a big game with real stakes since the 2020 playoff semifinal against Clemson. So I just don't know if he has what it takes to get his team playing with its hair on fire, despite all the motivational fodder that's out there. And there's a lot of it, a ton. But this is an Ohio State Homer podcast. I can't pick against them. Ohio State 45, Georgia 42. For the record, I'm not feeling super confident about that pick, but I am picking Ohio State 45, Georgia 42.
To the whole Ryan Day question, right? And I was kind of hearing like he's never been a head coach before. He's also, you can make the argument kind of learning on the job, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe, he's, learning a little bit after each one of these seasons and these big games. And maybe he can get there. Maybe he can't. We're not quite sure. But the jury is definitely still out. But he's definitely a great coach. Like
they asked Urban that the other day, and on multiple times, and it's like, is this a serious question?
Yeah.
Like, maybe what have I done?
He's lost 5 games.
He gets that job because of Urban Meyer, right? Let's just be clear, right? For whatever reason, Urban Meyer, and hopefully Urban's right. But to your point, Zach, it's a mixed record. But like anything, right? Like experience in anything in life, like your careers, like as a normal human being, right? The more you do the shit, oh, okay, yeah, I would do this different. I would do that. You grow as an individual, and hopefully he grows as an individual, and he can push those buttons, to motivate this team. I think he's obviously going to need to do it. And I do think it's kind of funny, right? Like they're anointing Georgia, the dynasty. It's like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? You're the dynasty of one. You've won one.
They haven't done shit.
Yeah. You've got one. So I do feel like we're getting a little over our skis, about Georgia. I mean, there's no question about it. That is something that a good coach can harness and
there's a lot of
motivate his team with
between now and Sunday morning. But I'll tell you what, if our score predictions come to fruition, I'm gonna I'm gonna be so excited to see you motherfuckers in LA. You know what I mean? At the national championship.
Well, first things first.
I'm gonna be excited to see you running down the streets of Cleveland naked with that Buckeye flag.
Yes. Totally. I 100% will. And if I hadn't already started smoking, I would give up smoking if we could win this game.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Ryan Day is that his teams had, it's small sample size, but his teams have played well in CFP semifinals, right? I mean, we know they should have beaten Clemson in 2019, and they bushwhacked them in 2020. So his teams show up and play well typically in the semifinal games. And I think we all agree, I think they'll at least play well. They'll compete. They'll play hard. I would be very, very surprised if they get embarrassed in this game. Very surprised and obviously disappointed. But I think they're going to come out swinging, and I think they're going to take the fight to Georgia, and we'll see if it'll be good enough.
Hey, can we give a quick shout out to Big Joe Van Horn, who's in Denver? PBH.
All right. Big shout out, Mr. Van Horn.
Watch the game with Joe?
Oh, yes. There will be a large contingent here at 1060 Locust.
Uncle Bill going to be making it?
Yeah, Uncle Bill. Okay. He's holed up in Lake Tahoe, Incline Village. He'll probably be
all right
hanging out there. But yeah, no, there'll be a whole crew here. And as Zach famously said at Bayside 15 years ago, or actually 25 years ago, to the people that aren't Ohio State fans, because it is New Year's, people, this is not a fucking social event for me.
Yeah. And it's not. And it continues not to be a social event for me, because I'll be watching it all by myself, locked in our guest room with, pillows, glued to the wall. I'll be watching it by myself, and it's just better that way. It's been... I've not been any fun to watch Ohio State games with. Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, listen, let's turn our attention to the other CFP semifinal between TCU and Michigan. I want to have a look at that game real quick. That's going to be played in the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. The game is a 4 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN. The line is Michigan -7.5. The over/under is 58.5. This will be the first meeting between these two schools, actually, on the gridiron. Michigan comes into this game, as we all painfully know, 13-0 as your Big Ten champs. TCU is 12-1. The Horned Frogs' only loss was an OT to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game. Let me just go through a few numbers here to inform your picks, boys, before we get to those. TCU comes into this game 15th nationally in total offense. They're 10th in offensive yards per play, so pretty good offense. They're 25th nationally in both passing offense and rushing offense. Now, defensively, leads a little something to be desired. 74th in total defense. They're 55th in defensive yards per play. They're 65th in rushing defense and 83rd against the pass. The Horned Frogs are led by Heisman finalist quarterback Max Duggan, who's completing 65% of his passes with 30 touchdown passes to only 4 INTs. Duggan is also TCU's third leading rusher with 404 yards rushing and 6 rushing TDs. That stat right there is something to pay attention to in this matchup. Wide receiver Quentin Johnson and running back Kendre Miller are other players to watch for the TCU offense. Those are good players. Now on defense, keep your eye on senior quarterback Travius Hodges Tomlinson. He's this year's Thorpe Award winner, and he's the nephew of TC legend and NFL Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson. So keep your eye on him. He's a good player. Now, we're all very familiar with Michigan.
Cool.
Yeah, we're very familiar with Michigan, but I'm going to go through some numbers anyway. Then we'll get to your picks. Wolverines come into this game 27th nationally in total offense. They're 19th in offensive yards per play. And naturally, they're 5th nationally in rushing offense. We know they can run the ball. That's what they want to do. They're still way down at 92nd nationally in passing offense, but don't let that stat fool you. J.J. McCarthy had a very strong finish to the season with 6 total touchdown passes against Ohio State and Purdue in the Big Ten title game. Now, on the other side of the ball, Michigan is 3rd nationally in total defense, defensive yards per play, and rush defense. They're 23rd against the pass. They're led by, of course, the aforementioned J.J. McCarthy, a quarterback. Star running back Blake Corum had season-ending knee surgery. He's not going to play in this game. But, I don't think it really matters because Donovan Edwards, man, he's been magnificent stepping in as the number 1 back for the Wolverines. I don't know about you guys. I think Edwards is the better back. I mean, to me, he looks like,
he's got explosive play.
He's got the game-breaking ability. Totally, yeah. He's kind of having a sophomore year that's similar to Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott really came on toward the end of the year and he just went berserk, putting up, video game numbers. Edwards is having that kind of late season push that Elliott did his sophomore season. Now, Michigan also brings the nation's best offensive line into this game. The Michigan O-line is the Joe Moore Award winner for the 2nd year in a row. Okay, fellas, let's get to our picks. PVH, who do you like in this game?
I was just envisioning like 3 TCU schmoes that went there having some podcast, just like we are, and coming up with reasons how I think Michigan I think it'll be close, but I think Michigan just kind of wears them down.
Which is kind of how it's gone all season, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They don't panic. They don't panic if it's a close game at the half, right?
Yeah, right. Like, I was thinking about like the Illinois game, like, which again, maybe that got us over our skis. Like, really, this is the team that's going to come in and beat Ohio State in Ohio Stadium.
And that fooled everybody. That Illinois game. I'm convinced it fooled everybody, even the coaching staff.
Yeah. But I just think Michigan wears them down. I think it'll be a tight game, but probably ends up somewhere, like 38-28. Michigan just pulls away. They just do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. So you like the over in this game, it sounds like. Yeah. 38-28.
I missed it. What is the over?
The over is 58.5.
Yeah, barely.
Don't rub that hard. Don't rub that head too hard.
Oh, dude. Yeah, math. I quit doing math a long time ago. But
I love us.
I just think, TCU, maybe, I don't know, puncher's chance. Same with us, but actually, I think we have a better chance. I'm done with that saying. I actually can't that. Fuck that. We have way better than a puncher's chance. But I do think Michigan pulls this out 38-28.
38-28. CP?
I'm going to go Michigan 27, TCU 26.
So you like the under, if my math is right. Okay. Look, I think Max Duggan is a hell of a player, and I think he gives the Horned Frog a chance in this game. I mean, Quentin Johnson, if he's healthy and can play, I know he's been dealing with some injuries. He's a big, rangy receiver. He's cut from the same mold as Marvin Harrison Jr., 6'4", and he could give the Michigan secondary some problems. I think Kendre Miller is a really good back for TCU. He ran for over 1,300 yards this season. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry. I think back to the Big Ten title game. Purdue hung around with Michigan in that game. And I know Michigan, PBH, as you said, they kind of slowly, methodically wear teams down. They don't panic if it's a close game at the half or in the third quarter. But that was a 9-point game early in the fourth quarter. The Boilermakers moved the ball pretty well, actually outgained Michigan, 456 to 386. Purdue just couldn't execute in the red zone. They had to settle for 5 field goals. And we remember Ohio State put up nearly 500 yards on Michigan, 492 yards of total offense. Same deal, right? We just couldn't execute in the red zone. But what TCU has that Ohio State and Purdue don't is a quarterback that can really run in Duggan. And I think that could make a difference in the red zone. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think Michigan wins it, but I don't think they cover. And I think these teams hit the over. Michigan 34, TCU 31.
That's funny because I was like, God damn, he's taking TCU, and then you still took Michigan. So,
took Michigan.
That was a good fake out. Bro.
Yeah. Well, I just don't know if TCU has enough defensively to stop Michigan, and because they're in the lower half of the FBS and a lot of defensive statistics. So I think it's gonna be tough to get off the field for that TCU defense. But I like Duggan.
Yeah, it'll be a good game for sure. And yeah, TCU.
I heard Harbaugh's wearing khaki pants for the game.
Really?
Newsflash.
I did hear that. Yeah.
Well, he just wants, he's the best of the best and going to play the best. And hopefully we do our best.
They're a really good team.
Hey, one thing real quick. I was circling back to Ohio State, Georgia. I'm just seeing this tweet by one of the Georgia beat writers. Their starting right tackle, Warren McClendon, and their best wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, neither of them practiced today. And they were both injured against LSU in the first half of the SEC title game. They didn't come back in the second half. Those would be pretty big losses for Georgia if they're down their starting right tackle, and especially McConkey. McConkey is Bennett's security blanket. He's their version of Jackson Smith and Jigba. So that would be a pretty big loss for them. Anyway, just want to mention that because I just saw that on Twitter.
Z, breaking news from the BDB.
Is that from the BDB?
It is.
Nice work, Z.
Bell Pre Daily Beast, breaking news again.
Bell Pre Daily Beast. There's no podcast
right here.
You heard it right here first and foremost.
All right, fellas, listen, we are well over an hour. That is a very nice effort for a Wednesday. Why don't we end things there and plan to reconvene sometime next week to recap this game? Hopefully we will be talking about an Ohio State win and a berth in the national title game. Until then, thanks so much for listening, everybody, and go Bucks. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.